It was supposed to be routine, a short assignment, just a 2-day sweep of a national forest perimeter where drone surveillance had gone dark. October 17, 2011, agents Lena Moretti, 31, and Brooke Delaney, 29, both assigned to a small but specialized bureau unit based out of Salt Lake City, were dispatched to the Rayburn Ridge sector, a vast and mostly untouched mountain range known more for elk trails and washed-out mining claims than anything of federal concern. They were scheduled to check in at 4:15 p.m. They never did. At first, no one panicked. Both Lena and Brooke were experienced field operatives, not desk agents. They'd trained in Utah's highlands, deployed in Nevada's canyon zones, and knew how to survive in the wild longer than most locals. Plus, they were sent in together, on a single agency-issued dirt bike built for rugged terrain. No cars, no convoy, just 2 women, 1 machine, and a set of old paper maps in a waterproof pouch. It was just surveillance, a quick pass through trail markers and a satellite blind zone. They weren't even armed with long-range weapons, because in theory there was no threat. When they missed their 4:15 call-in, dispatch tried again at 4:20, then 4:30. By 5 o'clock p.m., the mountain sun was already fading, and the signal? Dead. No GPS ping, no radio chirps, no trace on highway cameras from their last known location. That evening, their supervisor, Special Agent Ron Atkinson, logged the missed contact but still wrote, "No immediate concern, possible radio dead zone in the system." They'd had blackouts before. This wasn't New York or L.A. This was mountain country, where trees swallowed signals and storms turned roads into landslides. Besides, Lena and Brooke had never once failed a field check. They were smart, trained, reliable. But by the second morning, concern turned into urgency. On October 19th, to search, teams were dispatched by air and foot. Rangers, Bureau field staff, and a borrowed county drone combed 27 miles of terrain surrounding the agent's last known location. Checkpoint Sierra 12, a makeshift marker near an old copper mining trail. The area was rugged, barely a trail. More wildlife than foot traffic. What made it worse? No tire tracks, no broken branches, no footprints, no dropped radio, nothing. It was as if the 2 women had simply ridden into the woods and disappeared. The public didn't know anything at first. There were no press releases, no Amber Alert-style blast, no missing poster. Because officially, it wasn't a missing person case. It was an internal bureau issue, classified until proven otherwise. But inside their unit, the silence was louder than any alarm. Lena Moretti had been with the Bureau 6 years. Brooke Delaney, just under 4. They were friends, but also something more. They were each other's field shadows. If Lena walked into a site, Brooke followed. If Brooke noticed a camera, Lena asked who installed it. They worked together like twin magnets, always orbiting the same danger but never breaking pattern. Until now. According to dispatch logs, Lena radioed at 2:44 p.m. that day. She confirmed they were near Ridge Point G, about 2 miles west of their final checkpoint. Her voice was steady. "Looks quiet. Heading west toward the bluff. Bike's good. Wind's picking up." It was the last confirmed contact. There was no panic, no request for backup, no sign of distress. They simply never called again. By day 4, whispers began. Other agents in the unit started raising questions. Why weren't they backtracked more aggressively? Why only 2 sent in the first place? Why did we pull back the search so quickly? But the official response from the Bureau remained cold. At this time, the disappearance of Agents Moretti and Delaney is under review. All further inquiries are restricted pending internal investigation, which in agent speak meant they were on their own. The Rayburn Ridge region spans nearly 70,000 acres of broken forest, boulder fields, and old mining paths, some dating back to the 1930s. Locals weren't surprised by the silence. A retired ranger named Carl Simmons put it best when asked by a journalist months later, "You could walk 10 feet off some of those trails and never be seen again. You think those FBI types are special? Mountain don't care who you are." The FBI quietly suspended the mission. No bodies, no gear, no answers. Only two names, one missing dirt bike, and a growing file of dead leads. The case went cold. Until day 92, when a miner clearing rubble from a collapsed cave entrance near the base of the ridge found something strange inside. It wasn't bones. It wasn't blood. It was a bike. One FBI issue, all-terrain motorcycle, half buried in dust, leaned against the wall of a cave that wasn't even on the local mining registry. And it was still intact. But there was no sign of Lena, no trace of Brooke, just the bike. And what was taped under the seat would change everything. The cave wasn't even supposed to be open. According to old mining records from the 1950s, the Chapel Rock shaft, a narrow tunnel carved into the eastern face of Rayburn Ridge, had been sealed and marked unsafe after a collapse. Nothing had gone in or come out in decades. That's what Lyle Braxton, a 63-year-old seasonal miner, had been told when his crew was hired to clear out the rockfall nearby. But on January 14, 2012, exactly 92 days after Agents Moretti and Delaney vanished, Lyle's drill struck something that didn't feel like rock. It clanked, echoed, metal, curved. He thought it was old piping from a water line. What he found instead was a motorcycle tire. At first he assumed it was just some ATV trash. Campers sometimes dump things near old shafts, but when his flashlight hit the rest of the bike, he saw the faded black matty body, the Federal seal still visible on the fuel tank. That's when he stopped drilling and called his supervisor. By dusk, the FBI had been alerted, and by midnight, the entrance to Chapel Rock Cave was under sealed federal jurisdiction. FBI forensics arrived the next morning. They found one FBI-issued Yamaha WR250R dirt bike, no visible blood or tissue, no helmets, one torn GPS holster still clipped to the handlebars, and something taped underneath the seat with heavy-duty electrical tape. It wasn't much, but it was something. The object under the seat was a folded strip of waterproof paper, rolled tight and bound with a rubber band. It wasn't an official field log, not a code. No GPS coordinate, just a few handwritten words in red ink. If anyone finds this, don't trust them. And underneath that, in smaller writing, we weren't alone. It wasn't signed, but handwriting analysis would later confirm it matched Lena Moretti's known field notes. The exact spot was chilling. The bike was discovered about 80 feet inside the cave, leaned carefully against the stone wall, not crashed or thrown. No scuffs, no broken mirrors, no signs of panic. It hadn't been dumped. It had been parked, as if someone knew the cave wouldn't be found, or worse, someone wanted it found later. The bike presented a problem. Lena and Brooke had only one vehicle. If the bike was here, both of them were on foot when they left it. But where did they go? And why leave their only transport inside a collapsed shaft? The forensics team found no footprints leading in or out of the cave mouth. No drag marks, no blood, no shell casings. Nothing. It was like someone had erased their exit, or sealed it. For 3 months, the case had been in suspension. Internally, the Bureau had downplayed the disappearance, writing it off as a wilderness melee, or equipment failure. But now, with the bike recovered, two things were clear. Lena and Brooke had made it to the eastern ridge alive. Something, or someone, had intervened before they could return. The case was reactivated within hours. But something strange happened. Instead of releasing the discovery publicly, the Bureau went quiet. No media, no statement, not even an internal memo leaked to the rest of their team. "It's being handled off books," someone whispered. The cave wasn't natural. They think it was modified. The area where the cave was found, just west of Chapel Rock, had long been rumored to hide illicit survivalist bunkers from the late 90s. Some claimed cartels used it as a waypoint. Others said ex-military off-gridders had once wired the tunnels with sensors. But no one had ever proven anything. Still, after the FBI sealed off the cave, a former park ranger came forward anonymously to a local podcast. That shaft had been dead for 60 years, but last year we saw signs it had been disturbed. Our trail cam picked up tire tracks that vanished halfway through a logging path, and we saw flashlight activity where there shouldn't have been any. The date that footage was captured, October 17, 2011, the night Lena and Brooke vanished. Back in Salt Lake City, their old unit was reeling. Special Agent Ron Atkinson, the same supervisor who filed the initial no concern report, was now facing quiet pressure from DC. One former team member, who asked not to be named, told an investigator they were never supposed to be sent alone. That mission was flagged red 2 days before they left. But the field order still went through. Someone pushed it. When asked why Lena and Brooke didn't report it, because they were professionals, and if you question an op too hard, you're the liability. One final detail from the cave made the tech team uneasy. The GPS system on the bike, despite being hardwired and weather-sealed, was manually disabled, but not by destruction. By Remish Oval. The internal tracker chip had been unscrewed from its housing and was missing entirely. Whoever left the bike didn't want it found, but whoever wrote the note wanted the truth to leak. And that raised the question, if one of the agents was alive long enough to write the message, did she escape the cave, or was someone else using her words to throw investigators off? Before they disappeared, the assignment looked simple on paper. Lena Moretti and Brooke Delaney were assigned to Field Op 1F99, a satellite intel verification run through the southern sector of Rayburn Ridge. The objective, ground check 2 coordinates where drone imaging had recently lost signal. Satellite interference wasn't uncommon in that region, especially during seasonal shifts, but the anomaly had been flagged because of something else, a heat signature that had no clear source. There was no known cabin, no shelter, no tower, just a static white bloom appearing on 2 thermal sweeps, then vanishing. The file was passed to their division 2 weeks before the mission. Lena volunteered. Brooke asked to go with her. At the time, they were tracking different cases: child trafficking along I-80, a storage unit linked to a retired DEA asset, but both paused their caseload to take the assignment. Field time was rare, and both women knew better than most. Quiet assignments had a habit of turning loud. They left on October 17th at 6:12 a.m. from the East Canyon staging base. By 8:49, they passed the 3rd Ranger checkpoint and entered the blind zone. Neither agent was seen again. 3 months later, the cave with the bike was found. But by then, the chain of command had already splintered. Questions were being asked, softly, carefully, about how the mission was authorized. Internal request logs showed something strange. The original satellite interference report had been flagged for not urgent ground confirmation, but 48 hours before Lena and Brooke were dispatched, the priority level was silently escalated to red tier direct agent deployment. No explanation, no memo trail, no recorded discussion. Somebody had changed the file, and nobody wanted to admit who. Even stranger, another internal note was discovered weeks later during a field audit. It was a single line of digital metadata buried in an older mission folder. Red marker possible, do not engage, confirm structure integrity only. Structure? The mountain was supposed to be empty. Whatever they'd gone looking for, it wasn't just a heat bloom anymore. The location listed in the metadata? 41.56627 Digjaln N, 111.475 Dig. W. Only 3 miles from the cave where the bike was found. There was something out there, and someone in the Bureau had known it. But the official reports kept saying the same thing: routine thermal noise, low risk, training level clearance, no threats, no need for backup. Except Lena had emailed a single sentence to her sister the night before she left. If we're not back by Friday, dig deeper than they want you to. Her sister never understood what that meant. Not until after the bike turned up. Not until the photo of the note, "Don't trust them. We weren't alone," surfaced inside a leak folder sent to 3 independent journalists. No return address, just a manila envelope with no fingerprints, no prints on the rubber band. Inside, a printed copy of the note and a flash drive containing 1 piece of audio. A radio transmission cut halfway. 2 voices, wind, gravel crunching, then static, then a single whisper: "We're not alone. The voice matched Brooks. It wasn't in any official FBI log. The Bureau later denied it existed, but voice print analysis from an external tech firm said otherwise. It was authentic. That meant at least one of them had lived long enough to speak again after the last recorded dispatch. And if she had access to a radio that deep in the mountain, what else had she seen? There was a rumor, passed between field agents long about, after the case went cold, that Lena had been digging into something before the mission. A closed archive, a 2006 report about military-grade storage containers left behind in a mountain cave, buried after an emergency program was defunded. The archive was sealed, and after she went missing, so was her access log. No one wanted to talk about it, not even off the record. But someone had known what was buried up there, and someone had let them go in with nothing but a dirt bike, 2 field kits, and a dispatch time. The bike had no scratches, no signs of struggle. It had been parked. Either they stopped willingly, or they were made to. 3 months later it sat alone in the cold dark of a cave that shouldn't have been open, without a GPS chip, without prints, without blood. Only the message under the seat gave any hint of panic. Lena's words, or someone pretending to be her. That detail would remain in question. But what came next was not. Because 11 days after the cave was sealed, another clue appeared. Not from a body, not from tech. From something smaller, stranger, impossible to explain. Something found at the edge of the creek, 2 ridges east, where the water runoff had flooded after early snowmelt. A scrap of uniform fabric, FBI tactical weave. And pinned through it, a broken clip-on microphone, still smeared with dirt, still active, and set to record. The fabric fragment was small, barely bigger than a postcard, torn at the edges, water-warped. Its color had faded from bureau blue to a dirty slate gray, soaked from snow runoff and pressed into the rocks of a shallow creek 2 ridges east of the cave. But the thread pattern was unmistakable. Standard-issue tactical weave, only worn by federal field agents on wilderness assignments. It hadn't washed far. Nearby debris caught in the same current. Twigs, a candy wrapper, a broken bottle, suggest. Instead, it had drifted no more than 50 feet before getting snagged behind a fallen log. A state water ranger found it by accident while clearing debris from a footbridge trail. He thought it was trash until he noticed the small metal object pinned through it. A broken mic, standard FBI issue. The clip was twisted, the outer casing cracked from a fall, but the red diode blinked faintly. Still on, still recording. How long it had been active, no one could say for sure. Its internal clock was corrupted from water exposure, but the flash memory inside was intact. It had looped through its memory buffer dozens of times, overwriting itself. Only the last 38 seconds remained. Those 38 seconds would be passed around the Bureau like contraband, because what they captured didn't answer anything. It only deepened the mystery. The audio began with the sound of footsteps. Fast. Not running, but moving. 2 sets. One heavier, slightly behind. Wind. Water. Then, breathing. Close to the mic. Fast. Controlled. Then a voice. Female. Tight. Low. Turn it off. The other voice answered. No. If we die, someone needs to know. A crack. Stone hitting stone. The clatter of something being dropped. Then static. Shifting fabric. One of the women whispered, "I think he's behind us." Then silence. Then a click. Then one final sound, deep in the background, like metal dragging against stone, slow, deliberate, echoed. After that, the audio looped to dead noise. Forensics couldn't isolate the last sound, too distorted, too layered. But analysts agreed on one thing. It wasn't wind, and it wasn't natural. The mic was traced back to inventory. Serial number confirmed. Brooke Delaney's unit. The piece of fabric had matching threads to her field jacket. But there was no blood on it. It had torn, not ripped. She had likely removed it herself, which meant at some point, possibly after leaving the bike, possibly after the cave, Brooke had been alive, moving, recording, aware enough to try and document what was happening. But what had she seen? And who was? As he? The Bureau refused to comment on the audio. Internally, the case was escalated again. A secondary investigative team was assigned under covert clearance and moved into a private site 15 miles from the ridge. They brought new sensors, seismic equipment, magnetic rangefinders, non-agency personnel with military clearances. Not one of them wore an FBI badge. That same week, Lena's sister received an anonymous package in the mail. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside, a map, hand-drawn, and a single note. You were right to dig. Check the valley. It breathes. Nobody knew what it meant. But on the bottom of the map, circled in red ink, was an unmarked section of the ridge, roughly a mile from where the cave had been found, roughly 3 miles from where the Mike had surfaced. The Bureau never acknowledged the package, but by the end of January, new drone footage began mapping the valley in fine detail. One frame, just one, showed a narrow line of heat along the ridge wall. A vent, thin, hidden in shadow, covered in overgrowth, but not natural. It pulsed, like something inside was releasing bursts of heat every 30 seconds, not enough to alert satellites, but just enough to be found, if you were looking for it. And then, nothing. The drone malfunctioned, its camera feed cut, and for 72 hours no further flights were approved. No new teams were sent in, not officially, but satellite logs showed an unmarked agency SUV pass through the checkpoint leading toward the valley at 3:21 a.m. the next morning. No record of who was inside, no log of a return. The vehicle never came back, and that ridge, it remained unsearched, at least by anyone willing to talk about it. The cave was reopened in secret. Officially, it had been sealed, but after the drone feed cut near the vented ridge, the Bureau quietly returned. This time without uniforms, without marked vehicles, and without letting the local authorities know they were ever there. A 3-person team was dispatched under what internal memos labeled Black Escort Protocol. 1 geologist, 1 tactical lead, and 1 tech analyst. They entered the cave through the same shaft where the bike had been found, but they didn't stop at the wall where the vehicle had been leaned. They kept going. The original assumption had been that the cave collapsed decades ago, that the shaft was shallow and sealed after a mining failure. But now, with fresh sensors, the truth was harder to ignore. There were multiple chambers, tunnels behind tunnels, man-made cuts in the stone, and recent ones. The cave had been modified, recently. Metal rods, punctured anchors, handholds carved into the granite. Someone had been inside since the 2000s, probably longer. Deeper in, they found something worse. A small chamber, 8 feet wide, 12 feet long, no lights, no markings, just smooth walls blackened by burn marks near the ceiling. And in the middle of the room, a chair, metal, bolted to the ground. Heavy-duty restraints welded to the armrests. A surgical light, broken and cold, lay on the floor nearby. No power source, no wires, just the fixture, left there. A ring of old blood had dried underneath the chair's base. 2 DNA samples were recovered, 1 unknown, 1 matched Brooke Delaney. It wasn't a camp, it wasn't a shelter, it was something else. An interrogation room. Hidden in a cave, with no connection to law enforcement. No files, no names, no surveillance, nothing. Only silence. And blood. A 3rd chamber was located beyond the chair room. Narrower, colder. Air moved unnaturally through it, like there was another exit, maybe behind the rockfall. But what caught their attention was what had been left behind. A cloth, folded, perfectly square. Bureau-issued tactical scarf, regulation gray, torn along one edge. And inside it, wrapped like a bundle, was a badge. Lena Moretti's. Bent, dirty, the number still visible. Her nameplate partially melted. Next to the scarf, a dried flower. White, wilted, pressed flat, not native to the mountain. Someone had wrapped it intentionally, not left in panic, not thrown, misplaced. It was her way of saying something, that she'd been here, that she'd known she might not get out. The team collected the evidence and withdrew. They were told not to speak, not to document beyond the physical catalog. No notes. No photos shared outside internal systems. The mountain was listed as restricted airspace the next morning. Lena's badge was logged, the scarf labeled, the blood recorded. But the cave was resealed, the team reassigned, and then nothing. No follow-up, no interviews, no recovery efforts, not even to find the unknown second DNA source. The Bureau let it end there, but one of the analysts, off record, spoke later to someone they trusted, and what they said made the whole thing feel different. It wasn't the blood that haunted them, or the chair, or even the badge. It was something else they found on the wall, scratched into the stone, faint but deliberate. 3 letters, LBD Lena, Brooke Delaney. Scratched low, with something sharp, repeated, like it had been etched slowly over hours, carved over and over again. Below it, one line in crude block letters. Still here. They didn't know if it was a message or a warning, but it meant someone had survived long enough to leave it behind, and someone had been watching long enough to leave everything else in place. The signal had been buried for months, not in the ground, but in data, a background frequency, caught on a low-band spectrum that no one had been monitoring at the time of the disappearance. It wasn't part of the Bureau's usual comms sweep. It belonged to a civilian weather monitoring station 5 miles from Rayburn Ridge, automated, solar-powered, and barely functional after years of budget cuts. The tower had picked up fragments. At first, it was believed to be static, signal noise from seasonal storms. But a tech from a regional university reviewing archived files caught something strange, a repeat pattern. Morse code, intermittent, faint, but real. The message lasted only 14 seconds. It transmitted twice, once on October 19, 2011, and again on October 20th. The translation was simple. Alive, cave sealed, south wall, help. There were no call signs, no identification, just those words. The original report never made it to the FBI. The student flagged the transmission and sent it to a research lab in Montana, where it sat unnoticed for over a year, until an archivist reviewing unusual cases stumbled across the timestamp and matched it to the missing agent's timeline. It wasn't until January 2013, 15 months after Lena and Brooke vanished, that someone finally realized the transmission had come from inside the ridge. From within a mile of where the bike was found. The signal had been weak, its direction hard to pin. But the source had been real. Someone had been alive in the cave system after the initial search had ended, possibly days, maybe longer. The Bureau was notified through unofficial channels. An internal inquiry followed. But no recovery mission was launched, not even a second signal sweep. Official word was that the Morse message couldn't be authenticated, that no proof linked it to the missing agents. Unofficially, agents inside the unit knew exactly what it meant. Because Lena had a habit. She'd learned Morse code at 14 from her grandfather and used it during survival training as a fallback when radios failed. She practiced it constantly, annoyed Brooke with it, sent messages for fun during long stakeouts, and she always signed her name the same way. 3 dots, 1 dash, 1 dot. L. The same pattern was embedded at the end of the weather station's signal, a final flicker, 3 dots, 1 dash, 1 dot, and then noth. In Dawson, no one ever heard another message again. But it proved one thing: they hadn't both died on impact. They hadn't vanished instantly. They'd lived, at least for a while, long enough to carve initials, to drop a mic, to wrap a scarf, to signal with code, and maybe long enough to try escaping. Some agents believed Lena had made it farther than anyone thought, that Brooke had been injured, that Lena stayed behind as long as she could. Others believed the opposite, that Brooke was the one who kept moving, sending the message from a deeper chamber, maybe reaching a crack in the rock just wide enough to slip the signal through. But nobody went back to check the cave again. And the reason why wasn't just about the signal. It was about what one field tech claimed he saw during the extraction weeks earlier. It hadn't been in his official report, but during debrief, off the record, he said it out loud. just once. He said there were prints, near the southern wall of the second chamber, not boot prints, not barefoot, but something else. Toes, 5, narrow, human-like, but wrong, elongated, deep, pressed too cleanly into packed dust for any agent to have left them, too far from the entrance, too deliberate in pattern, as if someone, or something, had been walking circles, tracking, listening, waiting. The tech had mentioned it in passing, thinking it might be animal-related, but when he brought it up, his report was redacted. He was told to stop talking, transferred 3 weeks later. Nobody ever confirmed the story, but others had heard the whisper before, that the cave wasn't just a cave, that someone, something, had made it deeper, had shaped it, had watched from inside, and when Lena tapped her message into the darkness, she wasn't just calling out for help. She was warning them about what was in there with her. The photo surfaced without war. Ning. No sender name, no message, just an email, sent to an inbox belonging to a junior analyst in the Behavioral Threat Assessment Unit. It came through a private relay, bounced across 3 proxies, stripped of metadata. The image was blurry, grainy, night vision green, framed at an awkward angle, like a hidden trail cam mounted low. But what it showed stopped everything. A woman, mid-30s, dirty hair, pale face, half covered in what looked like a thermal blanket, walking alone along a snow-covered ridge trail, no visible injuries, no gear. She was looking back, as if she'd just heard something behind her. The timestamp on the image, February 3, 2012, 3.5 months after Lena and Brooke disappeared. The location, 6 miles east of the sealed cave. Her face wasn't fully visible, the side profile too dim for confirmation, but one agent swore it was Brooke. She had the same jawline, same narrow stance, same way of walking slightly toe-in, something that had been noted in her academy file but never medically diagnosed. The blanket? Standard bureau issue. Not something a civilian would have, and more importantly, she was alone. No bike, no second figure, no one helping her, and no one chasing her. At least not in the frame. The image was forwarded upward. Chain of command moved fast, but by the time the field team reached the ridgeline from the photo, the snow had already erased everything. No tracks, no fibers, no sign anyone had been there. And the trail cam? Gone. There was no record of a device ever being installed in that area. No serial tag, no housing, no mount, no retrieval log, just an image, a time, a place, and the haunting possibility that one of the agents had gotten out, if only for a moment. But where had she gone? If it was Brooke, she hadn't made it to any hospital. Her name hadn't shown up in any system, no facial recognition hits, no financial activity, no outbound communication. It was like she'd re-entered the world just long enough to be seen, and then disappeared again. There was a theory, unofficial, shared only in whispers, that she hadn't escaped, that she'd been let go, pushed just far enough to be captured on camera, a message, to show she was still alive, or to make someone think she was. The timing bothered people, because the image was taken just 5 days after the scarf and badge were found in the cave. 5 days after the trail to Lena seemed to stop. And that's when the questions began shifting. What if Lena didn't make it out? What if Brooke had? And what if whatever happened between them down there hadn't been an accident? The scratches on the wall, the initials, the message under the seat. They'd all been attributed to Lena. But what if they weren't? What if Brooke had written them? What if she'd escaped the chair, the cave, the unknown figure they feared was watching them, and left those signs behind? Or worse, what if she wasn't running from something? What if she was following orders? A field psychiatrist, who later left the bureau, once said something offhanded in a closed-session debrief, that Brooke had scored unusually high on resistance assessments, that she'd shown patterns of internal dissociation during stress testing, that she had a compliance reflex under pressure, adaptation that made her absorb control easily. She was resilient, too resilient, which raised the final question no one wanted to ask. If she'd been captured, what had they done to her, and who was the they? Every theory was worse than the last. Black site experimentation, psychological manipulation, Reprogramming, none of it provable, all of it terrifying. And still, no body, no conclusive trace of Lena. Only Brooke's microphone, Brooke's jacket, Brooke's possible face on the trail cam, which meant, at the end of it all, only one person had ever surfaced, and she hadn't asked for help. She'd just looked back, once, into the trees, and then disappeared again. The call came on a Sunday, not to a field office, not to the Bureau, to a local ranger station on the southern edge of Rayburn Ridge, a quiet post, mostly used for trail permits and wildlife reporting. The line hadn't rung in weeks. The voice on the other end was calm. Female. No accent. Measured. She said she was a hiker, claimed she'd been near the Upper Pine Basin just west of the blocked trailhead, said she'd found something. When asked to describe it, she hesitated. Then, "It's a journal, I think." The ranger assumed it was nothing. People left notebooks all the time, water-damaged, half-written, usually filled with survival notes or sketchy poetry. But she insisted, said it looked old, said there was a name inside. He asked what it was. She didn't answer, just gave the GPS pin, then hung up. By the time a team reached the location 2 hours later, there was no sign of her, but the journal was there, wrapped in cloth, placed in a hollowed tree trunk, weighted with a flat rock, dry inside, still intact. It was standard issue, Bureau field log, the kind agents carried on deep assignments when digital tools couldn't be trusted. Inside, 47 pages, some torn, some soaked. The ink was faded but legible. The handwriting matched Lena Moretti. She'd kept it. Somehow, during everything, she'd kept it. The entries were disjointed, out of order, written in pieces. But the story was there, fragmented, like broken glass. She'd survived the first collapse. She and Brooke had taken shelter when they realized their radios were blocked. A signal jammer, portable. They thought it was malfunction at first, until they found the cables. They'd been led. Not randomly. Someone had redirected their path with false markers, painted blazes that mimicked official signs but pulled them off the mapped trail. Then, a sound. Low, mechanical. A hum that vibrated the rock walls. And lights, too deep, too steady to be flashlights. Brooke was injured during the descent, an ankle sprain, minor, but enough to slow them down. That's when they found the first chamber and the chair. Lena's writing became frantic. Some words were scratched over again and again. They're watching. No one told us. Brooke, different. At some point, she'd been separated. For how long, she didn't know. When they were reunited, Brooke wouldn't speak, just stared. Did what she was told. She refused food, refused warmth, just watched the southern wall like it whispered to her. Lena wrote that she tried to break the lock, that she begged Brooke to run. But Brooke wouldn't leave. And then, one entry, scrawled hard. She told me not to fight. She said it was already inside. After that, the journal shifted, more confused, less grounded. They breathe stone. Metal is not what it's made from. She's not Brooke anymore. Then, a drawing. Shaky, done in the dark. A tunnel curving upward, splitting in two. At the base, 2 stick figures. One with a circle drawn over the head. One with an X, no explanation. Then, a final page, half torn. If you find this, they'll erase it. They erase everything. Don't trust the mission orders. Don't go near the ridge. She's still in there. But she's not alone. Not anymore. That was it. The last written trace of Lena Moretti. The Bureau never confirmed the log publicly. But internally, it was sealed. Archived. Labeled with a red tag no one could access without top-level clearance. The cave was resealed. The case was officially closed 6 months later. No bodies, no funerals. 2 names engraved in the Bureau's silent memorial wall. Agents who vanished, who went too far into something they weren't supposed to see. But every now and then, A ranger would report footprints where there shouldn't be any. Or hikers would hear a voice calling through the trees. Faint. Female. Asking for help, then gone. And in 2019, a new camera trap picked up something strange on a high ridge slope. A figure, in a thermal blanket, face turned away. Looking back again. Exactly like before. Just watching. Still here. They buried the case file under a new code. Not under the agents' names, not under the original mission ID, a new string of digits, untraceable to anything official. The log was split across 4 internal databases and marked no active access, even to those with clearance. It was quietly understood. Rayburn Ridge was now off limits. No more drones, no more ground teams, no questions. But the mountain never really went quiet. In the summer of 2016, 2 climbers from Idaho went missing during a 48-hour solo challenge. They were both experienced, ex-military, with emergency beacons and full gear. Their route passed the edge of the southern ridge, and then nothing. No signal, no distress call, no bodies. A third climber, who turned back early, said he saw something that didn't make sense. A glint of light, metal tucked into the trees. Then, a figure standing still at the edge of the trail. He thought it was another hiker at first, but when he waved, it didn't move, just tilted its head, then turned and vanished behind the slope. He didn't report it at the time. He thought maybe he was dehydrated. Until weeks later, he saw the photo from the 2012 trail cam. The thermal blanket, the pale figure, the same angle, the same tilt of the head. It wasn't a hallucination. He swore it was real. But nobody listened. The Bureau said the climbers likely got caught in a rock fall, that the weather had shifted suddenly, that rescue crews had been delayed due to unstable terrain. It was the same language they'd used in 2011. By then, almost no one from the original task force remained. Some transferred, some quit. One agent, quiet and sharp, the kind who remembered everything, was found dead in her garage in 2015. Official cause, carbon monoxide poisoning. The engine had been left running, but there were no keys in the ignition. Her personal files, notes on Rayburn, and 2 maps she'd hand-drawn were gone. Her sister said she had been digging again, trying to understand what had really happened, and then she stopped. People stop when they get too close. Even Lena's family stopped asking questions. Her sister moved states, changed names, didn't speak to press again, except once. In 2020, a podcast tried to trace back the last communication from either agent. They reached out to her for comment. She responded with a single message. We were told to look in the dark, but the dark was already looking back. No interviews, no signature, just that one line. And the strangest thing? That line matched something else. A note written in tiny print, found scratched into the back cover of Lena's recovered journal, overlooked during the first investigation, found years later during reclassification. We were told to look in the dark, but the dark was already looking back. Same words, same punctuation, which meant either her sister had read the journal or Lena had sent it to her before she vanished. But that couldn't be true, because the Bureau had sealed the journal the moment it was recovered. They'd locked it in Archive 7 at Fort Yates, and no one was supposed to have seen it, unless someone else made a copy, or someone never left the mountain. And in 2023, a hiker posted a short video online, deleted 15 minutes later, one frame preserved by a Reddit user who downloaded it before it disappeared. It showed a cave entrance, fresh footprints, and what looked like a badge, only partially visible, covered in dirt. But the metal glint was unmistakable. Just below it, etched into the stone, 3 letters, LBD, and next to them, 2 new ones, BR. They hadn't stopped carving. Someone was still down there.